So good morning, Karla.
Good morning, dear Judy.
And what I'd like to ask you is just a bit about Rudolf Steiner. And first of all, who was he?
Well, he was, you could say that Rudolf Steiner, I use a word now, he was an initiate. And, people don't really know what to mean, or what that means when you say initiate nowadays. But it means that's good. That's much better.
Yeah, it's more
I
natural.
have you. Yes. Would you like to sit on that other chair? You see, and then you are in the right height because you are now cut off. Just take it over there. Then we are right opposite each other.
So, all right. So hello, Karla. We'll start again.
Hello, dear Judy.
And I want to ask you a bit about Rudolf Steiner. And first of all, who was he?
Well, you see, you can say he was a man who had studied. He was an Austrian. He had studied. He lived from 1861 to 1925. And that was, of course, a time which were really, where intellect came up in a tremendous way and many new ideas, but especially where materialism came up. And he felt that this was the wrong way if one was just a materialist, that there was body, soul and spirit to the human being and to the whole universe.
So I hear those words mixed up. What does it mean, soul and spirit?
Exactly. Nowadays one doesn't even know what soul and spirit anymore are. You see, what do we mean by soul? Just let us take something, well, let's say you take a piece of an apple. You take an apple. You can see it. You can touch it. But that is only, you get part of it. You get only an outer thing. Then, nevertheless, what you have of it is a picture in your mind. It's a picture. You could then draw this picture. You could paint it. You see, all this is matter. This is really there. You can weigh it, you can measure it, and so on. But now you look at this apple and you can say, this is a wonderful apple. When I look at this color and, pink and just wonderful. And then you smell it, wonderful. And you taste it. And all these things, immediately it is your experience which you cannot measure. That lives in your soul. Moreover, when this apple is here, you can see it, I can see it.
What does that mean? What's the difference between seeing it living in your soul and just living in your body? What?
But your body, your soul is in your body.
Yeah, so what's the soul in the body?
That what we call soul is actually the capacity to perceive and experience and give it a name.
Okay, so the soul is where the feelings are and the sense impressions.
And you can give them a name.
Yes.
That is the important thing. You see, this is what always amazes me so much when you read something like the Old Testament and the creation there. You see, and there God had created everything, and then Adam, the human being, and the human being gave a name to everything.
Okay, so the soul gives a name to everything. What does the spirit do that's different?
Actually, the soul has the experience. It is the spirit that gives the name to it.
Ah, okay.
Do you see?
So the raw sense experiences. So does that mean that animals have got souls too?
Of course.
So animals have got souls.
Soul means sensitivity of which I am aware.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that I can name it.
Yes. Okay.
But I can react to it,
Yes.
which the animals do in
Yes.
a very wonderful way.
Yeah. So the spirit names it.
Yes.
And how do I know what's the spirit in me?
It is the faculty to do these things.
It's the faculty to name.
Yes.
So this is something that everybody has.
Every human being
Every
has.
human being has.
Every human being. And you see, let us go to how we come into the world. There we are, having been developed in the mother's womb, and eventually, and this fantastic temperature and warmth and all fluid and so on, and suddenly we come into this world and we breathe the air. And that we do with a scream when we come into this world. And then there we lie, and we can't even hold our head straight on this body. It's just so fragile. And the first thing is that we try then to get into the uprightness. You see, and then when we watch this, the whole effort of this early thing goes, first of all, we know straight, normally the child knows straight away how to get the mother's milk and food, to grow, you see, and then the next thing is to get into this upright position, to stand and to walk. And that is, when you watch this, how the children strive for this, you see, just is fantastic. I always remember I saw a nephew of mine, you see, how he thought he was by himself. He was a year old then. And he went in the kitchen of his parents. He went to a place where when he stood and had his arms out, he could just have a support left and right. And he crawled there, got himself up, stood there, and then he didn't know that I saw him. And then he took his hands away, and he did a step, and another step. And he was so happy that he threw his arms into the air, and of course fell down. But
Lovely.
Immediately he got up again, you see, and tried again. And that is, and when you see then these children, there is a wall, they can walk then, and wherever they see a low wall, they must get on it, first with help, and then, you see, just to get this freedom of your limbs, that you really conquer space in this.
And is that's different from a baby animal learning, or?
The baby animal is almost born with, you see, if you look a lamb or a calf, they are born and they can spring away, jump away.
Yeah.
You see, the human being has to learn.
And so that's a spiritual activity in that sense then?
Not entire, that is soul and spirit.
Yes.
That it comes to this upright position, that needs a spirit.
Yeah.
That needs a spirit, this individual thing. And then when this movement of the limbs has been conquered, there is another movement that we learn to conquer, and that is our speech organs. And therefore only in the second year we learn to speak. And we, first of all, we speak because we just love the sound. You know, lulling, we call it often, you know, when the children make their first sounds. And then the sounds take on meaning, you see. And it's very interesting. I'm talking of this nephew again because he was a child with whom I had so much to do, you know, when he was growing up. And the first animal he saw was a dog. The next thing on their outing, and so he was told, you know, Hund, that was in German, that is a dog, and he could not say Hund, he said Huni, you see. And the next animal he saw was a swan, and he said Huni, Huni. What he had grasped was not yet this individual thing of a dog, but he had grasped animal.
Yes, and naming.
And naming.
Yes.
You see?
Yeah.
And so the second year is really naming and learning to understand the difference in things and what they mean, you see. Fire is hot and ice is cold, you see, and things like this. And that we learn this not only through experience and react, but that we can name it. And then comes, and then the first thing is, every child is given a name, of course, you see. So his child is called by her name, you see. And then comes suddenly the moment that they say, and of themselves to begin with, they say, Mary wants, Johnny would like, you see, Johnny pain, and so on, you see. But suddenly they say, I want. And that is an incredible step in our consciousness. This, that they realize they are I. And you see, some poets have really been conscious of this. What a special experience that was when for the first time they were able to realize, to recognize themselves as an I.
And that's a spiritual activity.
That
and
is
that's
right,
yes.
purely spiritual.
Yes.
That is a real intuition.
Yeah.
Because you cannot learn this. You see, everything else is named for us and we learn it. But nobody says to you, I. Everybody says only to him or herself, I. Everybody says you to you.
Yeah.
You see, and to realize I am an I, that is intuition, and that is only the spirit can do that.
So that's the spirit that we all have.
The individual spirit.
And
that we have an individual spirit.
Yes. And earlier you were talking about Rudolf Steiner being an initiate. Now, what's the difference between being an initiate and having that experience of I?
Well, you see, we talk of colors nowadays. And our tremendous science, why, Newton was, of course, the first so-called scientist who really did this. There's, of course, Goethe who also looked at it and gave it a different explanation. And we say, there are it is light. Light we cannot see. Everybody agrees on this. Pure light you cannot see. You can only see it as color, when it has color. And then they say, you see, it comes to us in waves of a certain length. For instance, I was very excited. One day, I was sitting on an airplane flying to Amsterdam. And suddenly we were told that we would have to circle for half an hour longer than we thought, you see. And so you begin to talk to your neighbor. And it turned out that my neighbor had come already from Aberdeen and not only from Edinburgh. And that he was a physicist and had been at an international conference of specialists on I. And he, as a biophysicist, was there too. So we talked about color. And I asked him whether I was talking about the photosynthesis, you see, and that was so interesting that we have the green color then.
Yeah.
And he explained to me the following thing. He said, you see, now we can measure the speed of light. And see, it has a different speed, actually. It has a different speed. And when it is very fast, then you have the blue color range. But when it is slower, it goes from the yellow to the red. And the interesting thing is, he said, and that interested me then really what I heard, he said, you see, the light enters into the leaf, but it doesn't need all of it, all the light that comes in for making the chlorophyll, you see, and bringing about the green color. He said, so what is not needed is rejected. And the interesting thing is, he said, the light comes in on the blue range, but when it is rejected, it is on the red range. That means it has longer and slow, And of course, it's interesting, ultraviolet, you see, and you have infrared, and infrared is used also for instance, treatment, you see, and that is hot and very painful when it is too hot, you see. So how there is an activity in the light. Goethe has explained to us why it is blue in the one and why it is red in the other, you see, which Newton does not. But we have this abstract explanation of waves behind the color. But that doesn't always answer every theory which we have made to explain to ourselves about light and color. So some people have said, you see, we have packets of light as well. And so and all this is hypothesis to make them build up the theories. But now imagine, when you go back to a fairy tale, they speak, for instance, of a fairy, which brings you this color. A being that, and you can say, well, it's a force, but an initiate would experience all this really as active beings.
Okay.
And you see, we say they have second sight, or they are, have special, they hear things which we cannot hear. And for instance, it is true that Rudolf Steiner, when he was only 7 years old, he had an experience which taught him that there are things which you can see, and which everybody can see, is the colorblind or blind, but then others that you can see things which other people cannot see. And this happened in a very dramatic way for him as a child, because his father was a station master of a very small station, and he sat there in this waiting room because he liked to be by himself even as a child, and was a very thoughtful child. And in Austria, it was in Austria, and they have big tiled stoves, you see, very beautiful tiles, green usually, and big stoves. And he was sitting in the bench round, you see, and also other seats were there, and he was sitting there when suddenly a relation whom he had never seen in life, of whom he only knew, came in great despair, a woman, and said, please, please, try to do something for me as much as you can, now and always. And he thought she was there, and then he saw her vanishing into this stove. And that was very, startling to him. But the most startling thing was that only a few days later, they learned that this was actually an aunt who had committed suicide in that moment. And you see, there he realized that he had experienced something that happened far away.
Yes.
And yet he had seen it. There was a soul in despair. You see, that he could. But it was not only that, but also in these wonderful meadows which you have and flowers there in the Alps, you see, he realized that there are elemental beings, not just forces that are looking after the roots of a plant, after the leaves, after the blossoms, after the fruits and seeds. He could see that as beings and describes them. And that is not just, he had this as a gift as a child, but he realized that this wasn't good enough. He was also very clever because already at the age of 8, he got into geometry and was absolutely thrilled with doing geometry, you see. He could really think and imagine this, but he wanted to bring together the realm of thinking and of clairvoyance, which he had.
So I know many people who've had odd experiences. They've seen a ghost, or they've had prescience, they've known about something before it happened, or seen things or felt things, sensed atmospheres, lots of varieties of this. Does that mean that's an initiate experience?
No, because you see, we all can see and hear, and we are not all scientists and scholars. And that means that he actually learned, he trained himself in this thing. He disciplined himself. It was not just, I can see.
Okay, so you do something with the gift that you've been given.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And what do you do?
Because you have to learn. You see, we have to learn discernment in the world as we are.
Yes.
And you have to learn discernment also when you are clairvoyant.
So what can people do then? Because initiate sounds like one experience that you go through, like people talk about an initiation ceremony.
Yeah.
Now, did Steiner go through one process and then he could do it, or is it an ongoing?
An absolutely ongoing process. But it was interesting. You see, he realized, first of all, he realized he couldn't talk about this, and then about this, he couldn't ask anybody, you see, that he had seen such a thing, and only a few days later then he learned that such a thing had happened, you see, because a letter had arrived telling him this. And so, but he realized he could not talk to anybody about it. There was no human being with whom he could share this. And so, and this went on, you see, even while he went through the secondary school, where his gifts suddenly, his intelligence came out, because from the age of 15 on, he was actually tutoring other children, and even right up in classmates, right to the very top, he was doing this, you see. He was very intellectually very clever also, but he used his intelligence also. He was full of questions, and he realized that his classmates did not have questions which were as deep as his, although he was very social. He was very sociable and had friends, but as he put it, you see, he was interested in what they felt and did, but they couldn't follow him in his questions that he had. And then he went to university, and at that time he lived quite near. I mean, his father had, at his request, been actually posted to a place from where his son could then by train go to Vienna every day and study there, you see, and at university. And there he suddenly met a man who was a herbalist. He grew herbs. He gathered herbs, you see, he didn't grow them, he gathered them in the wild. And once a week he went up to Vienna and sold them to the chemists, you see. And this person, he realized, had the same gift, but in a wonderful way, that he knew everything about the healing qualities of the plants and also spiritual beings that actually brought about these various qualities in the plants, you see. So that was a tremendous relief for him.
Yes.
That was a tremendous relief that there was at last somebody, and he realized also, this man, he knew exactly that it was not just beings, but there was this connection between the universe with the planetary forces, for instance, also beings, like, for instance, Jupiter and all these, of the moon, for instance. We all know the tides, which are caused by the moon, and also how it affects growing of plants, you see.
Yeah.
So this is the one which we have a direct, if anybody has an experience of that who wants to know about it. But every planet has a certain influence, you see, and he knew exactly which planet with which plant was connected and so on. And that actually has been taken up by followers of Rudolf Steiner, and this was Lawrence Edwards, for instance, my colleague, you see. He would know, he also had learned the connection between the various planets and trees. And what he did was, have you noticed that in the autumn, when the leaves drop, behind every dropped leaf is already the bud for the next year? Have you noticed?
Yeah, sure.
Yes. You see, so what did he do? He, on the one hand, observed the constellation of these planets, and on the other hand, he had a tree for each planet, and from each he took buds, and he measured these buds. And because they all grow according to beautiful curves, path curves they are called, and he realized that these buds actually react to the constellation right through the winter. They go with the planetary constellations, how they move, and he said it's like breathing in these buds. It's like breathing, you see. So you can actually observe these things if you take the trouble to do this. And he measured it. I mean, fantastic. For years, you see, he has done this work. And it's now proven that it is like this. But still one doesn't pay attention to it, except there's a calendar, for instance, you see, that gives you actually a guidance through the year for planting and for harvesting and so on.
So Steiner learned from him, and he learned from Goethe, and he learned from all kinds of people. Now, people
He didn't learn from Goethe. I'm sorry, I wouldn't say that. What he said, he was looking for something that would actually explain to him his living in two different worlds of perception.
Okay, so for people now who are living in different worlds of perception, as many people are, I mean, I can relate to that. There's the things that I can just talk to people about. Some I can talk to one person, it's harder to talk to another. Some that I wouldn't know where to start. What do people do with this, and how do you know when it's, you know, initiate kind of experience, and how do you know when it's
Exactly.
a truth or a
Exactly.
fantasy?
Exactly.
Because people experience so much in a lifetime now. There's so much more going on. There's so much more information. They're dealing with the internet. How do you know? How do you find your way with all of this?
You see, the first thing is that in life you have to be very matter of fact. But this doesn't mean feelingless. You must be open to what does that say to me. You see, not whether I like it or dislike it, but what does it do? What does it say really? You see, that is, you must develop a certain attitude, you could say objectivity. And you respond then. You see, there are adequate response. We know some people who just, you know, something just, they're sent, and they just go over the top. And others, they just go into the dumps, which neither of which is really, you could say, justified. You see, the one is just over the top, as we say, and the other one is down in the dumps. Instead of having a joy which is just also right in its, you know, in its quantity, you could say, and in its quality, and also with sorrow and pain and so on. And there, the first thing is that you learn to look at your own soul life and your own reactions. Can I really think consistently? Can I concentrate? You know, nowadays, where you have all these troubles, the children cannot, they have such a short concentration span. And even grown-ups, you see. It's, I remember when I studied so many decades ago, it was still that one said 30 minutes is the longest for being able to concentrate. Now, that has shrunk like anything. Some children can't concentrate for 2 minutes, you see, and some grown-ups can't, and so on. So that there are exercises for making yourself learning to concentrate, you see, to be consistent in your thought. For instance, if you went to the Hindu exercises, you see, which they have about thinking. How many have they got? 9? 7? No, they have 8, I think. The Eightfold Path, you see. It says, there's the first, they also know something, you see. They really know how to get in touch with this world. Because the first task there is that we all use concepts, you see. And that we actually make conscious to ourselves where we have got a certain concept from. You see? So that is in the Eightfold Path that starts like this.
So that's a good starting exercise.
Yes, you see.
Yes.
But in Rudolf Steiner gives you one where he says, because that is actually already quite difficult, you see, to make really sure to yourself, now where have I heard for some time just such and such a word, you see. And actually when you learn another language, it's very helpful that you suddenly remember where a certain word you have learned and under which circumstances, you see, and so on. But he says, take a simple thing and just really concentrate on that. Look at it really absolutely what it is, you know. And he says, for instance, a pin. And it's better you take a pin than you think of Napoleon, you see, because Napoleon is so interesting that it would easily take you along, you see. But for a pin, which seems to be uninteresting, you see, to just say, what metal, point, etc., what can you see on the pin? And you really do not waver from this and suddenly go off to something else, you see. That is very practical. you see.
And with that, knowing that one practical one, and that's the kind of thing that Rudolf Steiner gave, and all that you've been speaking of now, is that a good point
Very good. You
to
see,
round
that is
up
only
things
the first
now?
of 6 exercises which
but-
she gives
yeah.
as a rule.
But that's a good example and a good one to start with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And knowing that, is that a good place to stop now
Yes.
in the conversation?
Absolutely.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.